Yo friends, it's spring planting season. Let me walk you through what I'm doing here in the nursery to plant out a couple hundred, if not 1,000 or so, fruit and nut trees. Most of my work in the nursery is being done in these air prune beds. I have 7 of them, and each one holds 1 to 200 seeds, depending on variety of tree. Air prune beds are really great for anything with a long, deep taproot. You won't really need it for maybe like apple or pear seedlings, but it's perfect for, chestnuts. I do have a bunch of stuff in these buckets here, a bunch of like berries and Juneberry trees, some really awesome seeds I collected from the John Hershey farm in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, of just a stellar, completely disease-resistant crabapple loaded with fruit. But let me talk about the air prune bed this morning. Let me share with you what it is and what I've been doing with them. The concept's pretty simple. It's just like a classic raised garden bed. But underneath at the bottom of these raised beds, instead of a solid bottom, it's this wire mesh, which is being held at the bottom here, and then the whole raised bed is literally raised up off of the ground. I piled a lot of wood chips around these, so they don't really look like they're raised up, but there are some supports. I probably will go through in the next few months and throw cinder blocks underneath these just to get them even a little higher off the ground. I feel like when I filled them with this soil, a lot of it sunk through the cracks and is kind of making a continuous bed. You don't want that continuous bed. You really want a nice pocket of air beneath the bed. The idea is as the long, deep taproot of your chestnuts and your pawpaws grows down through the bed, it hits that pocket of air and it self-prunes, an air pruning bed. And so the taproot stops growing and it starts sending out more side and lateral shoots. I think this is really great because if you plant directly in the ground, and also for just digging up and transportation, like a 2-foot long taproot is really, really hard to carefully dig up out of the ground without harming the plant. It's something that can really easily be done and taken care of here in an air pruning bed. Plus, I think a young tree that a human is actively taking care of and cultivating doesn't quite need that same long, deep taproot to reach deep for water and nutrients. If it starts working on more side shoots, that's okay because we are on top of fertilizing and watering it some to get it through those first year or two. After that, it should be pretty self-sustaining. So the bed design is pretty simple. Raised bed, literally raised up off the ground by a few inches. I filled it here with some leaf compost I got from a local township. They delivered it for me last year and it's been sitting and I've been using it for various garden projects. I feel weird growing in just leaf compost. I feel like there should be more in here, but I have a friend at Living Soil Tree Farm who says this is what he does and it works great for him. In other years I've tried mixing in maybe 2/3 compost and 1/3 coconut coir. Mixed results. I wasn't quite super excited about that, so we're gonna try it this way this year. So you plant directly in this. I'll show you how that's done in a minute, and then after the planting I do a nice thick layer of wood chips on top of everything. That helps retain moisture and that helps to prevent any weeds from breaking through as well. And then after the wood chips, it's really, really important to protect from squirrels and other rodents. So I've done some work on these beds, putting in this 1/4-inch mesh around areas where there's a nice gap between the two bed frames. And I didn't want any burrowing rats or mice or anything getting in there and getting into the seed bed. I have a few different designs for over-the-top protection, as you can see. This is a pretty sweet cage. Man, one problem with it is it's just hard to get in here and pull weeds and take care of things. The top is removable, but it's a big drop. I really can barely get my arm all the way down there. And everything is stapled. It's stapled all around the edge. So it's not my favorite design by any means. It's hard for the squirrels to get in. It's also hard for me to get in and do some weeding, although that's not as necessary with the thick planting and the thick layer of mulch. The other design I've been trialing here is not using the 1/2-inch mesh to build a cage, but using this chicken wire to just lay it directly atop and staple it down so squirrels can't really get in here and steal nuts. With these larger holes, the trees have no problem breaking through and growing up. Now there's no deer protection in this system. This would protect from deer as well, but I'm surrounded by this fence, so I don't think, oh God, I hope deer won't be a problem this year. This too isn't really that great to weed with. If you let the weeds get out of control, their roots don't really want to come up through these holes, and it can kind of disturb the trees. So my goal this year is for these beds here to try to stay on top of weeding it every few days. Just pluck the little guys before they really get a chance to grab hold, and see if that works for me this year. So when I'm planning out these beds, I'm planting pretty densely. These are some seeds, some pawpaw seeds I got from just some amazing trees that were dropping fruit a month, maybe 2 months after the other trees had started to drop their fruit. So the really great season extension orchard variety pawpaw seedlings. So I'm just generally laying it softly on top of the soil, maybe pushing in a little bit, but I also know I'm putting an inch of mulch on top, so I'm not too worried about really actually planting these seeds. And I'm planting pretty densely here. The seeds are almost touching, it feels like. This is definitely a terrible long-term solution. You really wouldn't want your trees to be in these beds like this and this densely planted for more than their first year. But for 1 year, it'll get them going. They'll be happy, they'll be healthy. Also planting this densely helps weed, stops weeds from breaking through. It shades out the weeds, and it allows me to grow a lot of trees in essentially like, a couple hundred trees per parking lot space. I found their roots do tangle a little bit, but they weren't too bad to pull apart, to parse out when I pulled them out of the beds last year. Not that really big a deal. They're pretty strong, pretty hardy, and if you break off a few of the roots here and there, it's not that big a deal. I don't have like the perfect amount of seeds for each of these. These pawpaw seeds will fill maybe a third, maybe half of the bed at this spacing. One of the things I really regret last year is I did like almost rows of difference. I did like 2 rows of pawpaws and 2 rows of persimmons and 2 rows of, it was a mess. It was just hard to sort out the plants after all the leaves had fallen off. It was just hard to kind of figure out, take care of the plants because they all had a little bit of different needs and they were all sharing so much close space. So my goal this year is maybe like 2 varieties per bed at most. So if I can't fit a bed full of pawpaws, I do maybe half of pawpaws and half of chestnuts or something like that. Really what I need here are some smaller beds. These are awesome when I have tons of seed, but I gotta make some smaller beds. One of the things I found last year too is I had, little sticks with the name on it, but there was a lot of information I wanted to record about each bed or each variety of seeds. I just couldn't fit on a little stick. So what I've done is I've numbered each of the beds, and so 1 through 7, and then I've linked those numbers to like a Google Doc sheet, and so I can put in paragraphs of information. I say in bed number 1 on the easternmost side are pawpaw seeds that I collected from this source. On the westernmost side are chestnut seeds I got from that source. I type in like what I filled each raised bed with. Some of the beds I used some coconut coir. I've also kicked around the idea of filling a bed with like half compost, half topsoil. So I can write down like what I filled the bed with, when I planted it, full of information, and I don't have to try to fit it all on a tiny little name tag. These trees I'll leave in here until the leaves start to really turn and even start to fall off. That shows me that the trees are in dormancy in the fall. And when they're dormant like that, you can pull them out of the bed and shake all the roots off of the soil and move the trees around as bare root trees. As long as the roots stay moist, wrapped in a wet, damp newspaper or paper towel, the trees will be happy and content. And from what I've read and from what I understand, they will handle transplanting much better, much lower risk of transplant shock, because you're moving them while they're asleep essentially, and so when they wake up in the spring, they'll be in a new location, but they won't really have recognized that they moved. If you wanted to do this at home and you had a smaller selection of seeds and you didn't want to grow out 200 trees, but you wanted to grow out a good number in a space like this, one of the things you can do is use something like a milk crate. Fill that with soil and plant into that. You could fit 10, 15, maybe 20 trees in a milk crate like that using the system. And so it's a lot more economical and pretty cheap and easy to come by and pretty easy to do yourself. Just remember, anytime you're growing from tree seeds like this, it's a little different than your tomato seeds. Tomatoes kind of been bred to be self-pollinating, and so the tomato seeds you're buying in packets or collecting yourself are pretty much guaranteed, not always, they can cross-pollinate some, but pretty much guaranteed to be the same variety as their parents, as their parent, because that one parent self-pollinated itself and made seeds identical DNA to itself. With tree seeds, though, they don't really do that. So they have a mom and a dad. So the seedlings that you grow, you have no real guarantee on what they'll be like. I think these pawpaw trees that I'm growing out today, because they were grown from orchard trees with larger fruit, heavier production of fruit, less seeds, all of these seedlings will meet a lot of those characteristics, if not all of them. The taste will be probably similar to their parents, but not exactly the same. And because I collected them from the latest dropping fruits, there's a good chance a lot of these seedlings will also drop much later fruit than normal. But there's no guarantee. It's just like having children. Sebastian is a little bit like his mom and a little bit like me, and thankfully more like his mom in important regards, and in a fun way like me in some silly regards. But it's a bit of a crapshoot. I think that the diversity of seedlings is one of the things that excites me the most right now about my nursery work. I'm really excited about sharing these plants with people and introducing some really delicious, fun, unique plants to people. I'm excited and encouraged when people start to replace their grass lawns with native fruit and nut trees. But I'm also just really excited right now about the genetic potential and breeding, finding cool and unique, not only like types of fruit like pawpaw, but also cool and unique varieties of those pawpaws to pass off some of their genetics, but also kind of roll the lottery of life, roll the dice of life, and see what new genetics these produce, and bring new life and new diversity into the world. One of the problems with modern agriculture, one of many problems, is our addiction to monocultures, our addiction to planting the same exact variety of the same exact thing, covering acres and acres and acres of land. Same exact variety of corn, covering acres of land. The problem there is that there's not much diversity in a field to feed a diversity of insects and birds and animals. But also, the problem is there's not much diversity within the plant genetic itself. So we're having this problem right now with bananas. We eat like one genetically identical variety of banana in the Western world. You don't go to the grocery store and choose between your Honeycrisp bananas and your Fuji bananas, right? Like you would an apple. The problem is there's a disease that is plaguing banana farmers and banana fields, and it's spreading across these trees, and there's no genetic diversity in these trees to protect themselves from this disease. All of the trees, every single one of the trees, are susceptible to it because they're all genetically identical. This is the last bed of the week, so I'm having to break some of my rules here. I only have a handful of pawpaws and a handful of each of these seeds left. And now I'm doing a row here of some Japanese chestnuts I collected from a local park. And I'm gonna try really hard not to put two pawpaws in the bed, but if I do have one other bag of pawpaws left, there'll be a lot of things separated. So I know these are pawpaws from one variety or one field I collected, and pawpaws all the way over here are different. So I should be able to keep everything sorted out when I pull everything out of the bed in the fall. I've found that by not pushing them deep into the soil, it helps me keep track of the rows easier. If these pawpaws really blend into the soil, if I pushed it into the soil, it's just hard to see where the rows are, and it's easy to like overlap my planting. So I'll come through at the end and shovel a thin layer of compost on top of this so that they feel like they're underground, and then put some wood chips on top of that. This is still something I'm kind of new at and only not been doing that long. I feel like I have a good handle on it, but I feel like there's still probably a ton of stuff for me to just learn and discover over the years. So if this is a growing method you're interested in, excited in, I encourage you to check out some of the other really awesome people out there doing this. I know Sean from Edible Acres, and their YouTube channel has a lot of great videos about air prune beds. So check out people like that, check out, see what other people are doing. There's different ways of doing it. These are all one of the same bed with maybe two different ways of protection on top, but there's a lot of different sizes and shapes of bed and little different designs that people get excited about. So do some research, find out what's right for you. Let me know if you guys have any questions on what I'm doing here. Let me know if you want any really awesome pawpaws or anything else. I'll have an absolute butt ton ready to go here in just the end of the year. Have a happy growing, friends.